Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're going to do something a little bit different. A lot of you are used to seeing me interview people on my YouTube channel, and I'm still going to do that. I know we've kind of taken a break from the Galactic Lounge Live, but I do have plans to bring that back in the future. But I have the wonderful Brenda Adelman here tonight to ask me a few questions about what I do. And Brenda is an award-winning speaker, actor, coach, digital course creator, and the author of the Kindle book, My Father Killed My Mother and Married My Aunt, Forgiving the Unforgivable. She is the recipient of the Hero of Forgiveness Award and has a proven three-step forgiveness process. She's been interviewed on CBS, NPR, Fox TV News, and over 200 podcasts, publications, radio, TV shows, and other media outlets. Wow. She's performed her critically acclaimed one-woman show, My Brooklyn Hamlet, based on her life story for over 12,000 people on stages in 4 countries and 10 states, and now virtually. She has taught over 200 mission-driven performers and heart-centered small business owners who are the face of their business how to heal from their story and how to create their own successful TED-style talks and one-person shows. Her clients have presented throughout the US, Europe, Canada, and now virtually. She has a free group on Facebook called the Soul Story Tribe, and she's also going to be doing a free challenge starting soon on February 6th called Find Your Soul Story for Impact and Income, and I'll post the details to that down in the comments section. Thanks for coming on, Brenda, by the way.
Thanks so much for having me. This is going to be fun.
A pleasure. Just so everybody knows, Brenda and I have been kind of interacting off and on and connecting, and it took several months for us to get back around to reconnecting again, and here we are.
But then when we did, pronto, it happened quickly. Yes. So this is interesting. I have an opportunity to interview you. I also am usually the guest, although I am working on my own show right now. But I was interested in this because, I know that we are a part of something so much bigger, and yet I have not been schooled in astrology. And I have had a couple of readings over the years. Always feels like I actually have no free will when people do readings for me, because it's like, yep, there it is. That's my life. So I would just like to find out a little more about, like, how did you get into it, and what do you think the power of knowing about this is?
Yeah, actually, I want to start with your second question first, because I think that leads into the first one. I have a personal philosophy, which is that astrology really is a form of yoga in the purest sense of the word. Most people in the West, when you say yoga, immediately they just think of exercise, postures, etc. But yoga truly is any way of union with your soul and, ultimately with God. And I think that astrology is a form of that, and a very powerful form of that. And I feel like in modern times, we've kind of taken it and focused it on what's going to happen to me. When is it going to happen? Which, talk some more about that a little bit later on. But the way that I came to it is, interestingly enough, like some time ago, I used to live with another astrologer who was a professional astrologer. And I kind of connected with astrology a little bit through him, but I already had a general interest before that. And I've always had an interest in Eastern philosophies. And at one particular point, I was actually a Kundalini yoga teacher. And I went to an event once, pardon me, where there was somebody who was working there who was actually a Vedic astrologer. And I sat down in the chair next to him. And a lot of times Vedic astrologers, like who do it traditionally, have this way of liking to surprise their client. And they do it as a way of establishing confidence between the client and the astrologer. So I sat in the chair, and the guy asked me 2 questions about my dad. I don't even remember what they were. And then he goes, "You were actually born a minute and 10 seconds earlier." And I'm just going, "Well, how do you know that?" And I was just surprised. And Now I know how he did that, because he was adjusting my chart based upon the questions that he was asking me. He was going, if we move the birth time back there, that would make sense. And so he was adjusting it on the fly, right? But I was just
Wait,
really,
does that mean that they lied at the hospital?
here's the thing. That's another interesting topic. Hospitals, when we're dealing with birth times, we're not dealing with anything confirmed, because obviously when the mother is giving birth, the focus is on the baby and the child. So sometimes the doctors are writing down the time like 10, 20, 30 minutes later. And sometimes they're going, oh, what time was that when that happened? And they're
That's
just
very
kind of
interesting. Wow.
estimating. And there's a whole branch of astrology that I also work with, where you can rectify the birth time and know what time the birth time actually was for a person.
That's so interesting. I did have someone actually recently want to do a reading on me, and I was telling her I couldn't find my birth certificate. I just moved,
Mhm.
and but I knew around the time, and she was like, she said that it should be okay within like those 10 minutes, and this is
Mhm.
probably why.
But you see, the interesting thing is with Vedic astrology, because we work with not just one chart, we take the main birth chart and we cut it up into portions. And there's like 16 mainly used charts, each for a different purpose. And in some of those more finely tuned divisional charts, a small discrepancy of like a minute or two will make the chart completely different.
And yet we're saying we don't necessarily know if they're accurate, the times that we're getting. So that's
Exactly.
like
And so what you do when you rectify the birth time is you take any predictive technique that you have, that you trust, that you know is fairly accurate, and you ask the person for events in their life, and then you adjust the birth time to
what does
match
that
the
mean,
events.
predictive event or predictive
Well,
technique?
Vedic astrology is renowned primarily for its predictive accuracy, and I'll go into that. Like, for instance, because I've done a lot of prediction myself, I'm tending to veer away from that now. But I have predicted things like people getting jobs to like within a day. Really, it's really,
Holy
yeah, no.
moly.
Well, I had
Yeah.
one client once who, they were a freelancer and they contacted me, and they were wondering when they were going to get their next job, but they were also like really a student of astrology, so it was becoming a thing. Even though it was a paid consultation, it was a lot of fun between us. And so I looked at it, and through combining several different techniques, which is what you do, you narrow down windows of time, right, until you have a short window of time. And then you look at transits that might create the event. So through doing that, I saw this period of time that seemed to suggest that they were going to get a job offer on January 1st. But I went, but that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen, because who's going to call you the day after New Year's Eve and offer you a job? And they went, yeah, you're probably right. And so we were both joking about it. And they sent me an email like about a week after the first. They said, I didn't think it was going to happen either, but somebody called me on the 1st of January and offered me a job.
That's interesting because so many people believe in the power of our thoughts, and yet here that was in the astrology saying it, but the thoughts were no, it's not going to happen, and yet it happened anyway. So then I
And
wonder, how much do our thoughts matter? you know?
they matter quite a lot. And I'll explain. That's a good point. And I'm glad you brought that up. So a thing that I go through with my clients now, because my main focus on astrology these days is empowering the person rather than placing them at the whim of fate. Because I feel like putting somebody at the whim of fate doesn't always help them.
What do you mean putting them at the whim of
Yeah,
fate?
I'll explain. It's because what I've encountered a lot in consultations, an astrologer can only really be what I like to say 100% accurate 70% of the time at most, right? So 100% accurate means we're right, we get it right, but we can only do that about 70% of the time. So that means, but interestingly enough, sidetrack.
Wait, is there a stat on that, or that's an inner knowing?
No, a lot of us have kind of kept stats on things and things like that, because really astrology ends up becoming much like a spiritual science, right? And there's actually a very well-renowned astrologer working with the Vedic tradition called K.N. Rao. And one of the things he comes out with and says is if a technique is accurate 60% of the time, then that's a good technique.
That's interesting. Huh. And is there a science to why that 30 or 40% isn't accurate yet?
That's exactly what I want to share. And it's exactly the foundation of like what I'm doing with astrology. But answering what you were saying about the placing somebody at the whim of fate, what I begin to encounter is generally when a person's approaching an astrologer for a prediction, it's because that area of their life isn't working well, right? And they're wanting it to work well. So if their chart is set up so that that area of their life isn't working well, chances are they're not going to hear what they want to hear in a large percentage of the time.
Oh,
If
because
you're
it's right
reading,
there in the chart, but there's no way to change that?
and that's what I want to get to. But kind of going back to the original point with that, it's so quite often you'll tell people things, and like let's say for instance somebody came and they're going, I want to be a musician. Does it seem like I'd be successful with that? If I told them honestly, I might look at their chart and go, it's going to be really hard for you to earn money from that. But at the same time, that takes their passion away from them, and that's not healthy.
Right, and then if you take the passion away, then they won't make the same decisions. I remember
Exactly.
I remember going to a party in my 20s in New York, and there was this woman in my acting class, and we went and did tarot cards, and this person said, "You're not gonna make a success. You're not gonna be successful." And then she
Yeah.
dropped out of acting class and everything. And then I always wondered, like, did he change the fate? Like, did he change it because she made different decisions, or did he really see it? Like, if there's other possibilities. Yeah.
Mm. But you see, here's the interesting thing, because and something I always like to ask my clients when I'm kind of connecting with them and when they're like coming to me and they're wanting to focus on prediction, and I'm trying to steer them a little bit away from it. It's not that I think that prediction's wrong or bad. I just think it doesn't always serve people or help people. So when they come to me, I'll like ask them, I'll go, so are you your horoscope? And about 90% of the time they'll go, yes. And so then I'll go, you're not. You're not your horoscope. You're not even the indwelling consciousness experiencing your horoscope. You're something way beyond that. All your horoscope shows you are your karmic tendencies, ways that you are predisposed to behave at any given moment in time.
So
And
what would you do with that, like that musician? If you see that in there, it shows that they won't make money at it. What do you do? And then is it possible they would still make money, even though that's in their stars and the stars?
here, generally, the way it seems to work is those karmic tendencies will bring a certain level of something to the surface, but we have a choice in terms of how we respond it, because the word karma also means action. So our karma of like things that we're having to kind of resolve in our life are created by actions we've taken previously, and it's our actions that we take that unravel those karmas. So interacting with your free will with your horoscope is a very important thing, and yes, it can affect it. But to give you a prime example of that, this is something that a lot of my viewers have probably heard loads of times, but I love telling this story. There was someone who had come to me and they were wanting to get divorced, and they were living with their husband and it wasn't working for them, so they wanted me to tell them when I thought it was going to happen. So I told them, through looking at the factors one looks at, what I thought when I thought it would happen, made the prediction, and they contacted me after the prediction, like time went past, and they said, I didn't get divorced, what happened? And I went, well, did you try to get divorced? And they went, no. I went, that's what happened. Because what an astrologer is seeing when they're seeing divorce is separation from the spouse, breaking of the relationship, tension in the relationship. And so all those things came to the surface. They just chose to respond to it in a different way rather than going down the divorce path. So in other words, like if you're looking at your horoscope and it's going, this can be a tense time for relationships, the tension's likely going to be there, but you get to choose how you want to work with that and how you play it out. And that's what matters more than anything. So what I would say to the person who's a musician, based upon another circumstance, which I'll just kind of recount briefly, of someone who had a major job offer, right? And they were going, whenever I have job offers like this, I take the job, and like within a short period of time, I'm severely disappointed with the job. And he goes, and I need to know if I'm going to like uproot my family and move them halfway across the country, that I'm not going to do that this time. And I said, well, when would you be taking the job? And he gave me the time frame, and I looked at it and I said, well, if you take the job, probably shortly after that, you'll feel disappointed. And he went, oh, so I shouldn't take the job then. And I said, not necessarily, because if you stay in your present job, you'll still be disappointed. So it's a matter of choosing whether you want to go with your heart or not. So in all matters, I believe we should always go with our heart, even if we're facing the challenges that are there, because it's those challenges that bring important lessons that we grow from. They, strengthen our resolve. We learn from opposition how to work around things, and it's just exceptionally important. So in short, I would probably tell the person who's considering being a musician that even though it may be difficult for you to do that, if that's where your passion is, you should go for it, because you might find you succeed more than you think that you do, because I'm looking at limitations, but I might be looking at limitations that you're happy with or comfortable with.
It's
And also just to add to that briefly, also what you'll find is that not every period in a person's life is going to feel limited. So they can go through a limitation period and then a boost period, then another limitation period, because that's just how life is. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. What I have a question about
Yeah.
karma. So when you're doing astrology, are you looking at karma in this lifetime or like lots of lifetimes? Like, I don't know the belief system.
Yeah, very good thing you said the last bit, because what I think about it is we relate to time in terms of, I always use my pen for this, present, past, and future, right? But in reality, it's all happening right now, because that's the only moment we can ever really experience.
Like in the quantum field
yeah,
kind of way?
yeah,
Like, so it's the
exactly.
future and the past and the now. Okay.
And it's all right now. I mean, right now we have our memories of the past, we have our concerns about the future. The moment the future is here, it's the present moment again. And that's the only thing
Of
we
course,
can ever really experience.
but then there's past lives, and then some people can tap into them, some people don't, some people believe,
Exactly.
some people don't. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what you're actually looking at through the horoscope, and then one of my main consultation techniques that I do involves something called a karmic analysis, where I look at something called the karmic story. And what I always tell people answers the question that you were just asking, which is, I say, we're probably not just looking at one lifetime, we're probably looking at several lifetimes lumped together. And I'm turning it into a story or a drama for you to help you to understand it and make sense of your life. But we can't really go back in a time machine and go, this was an actual previous lifetime. But I've done that technique with a lot of people who've had regression therapy, and it always matches the things that they went through in regression therapy. So it's always really amazing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And then I noticed on your site you talked about creative symbolism. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there's a specific thing in the Vedic system of astrology. An easy way to understand them in plain English is calling them the lunar mansions. In terms of the Sanskrit word, they're called the nakshatras. Pardon me. And they're 13-degree and 20-minute sections of the sky. It's a completely different division of the heavens, which we can interpret through the horoscope chart. And these are exceptionally rich in symbolism. So, for instance, I have a really wonderful story that I like telling about that, of working with someone, and they had the area of their chart that represents home, which is the fourth house, was in a section of the sky called Uttara Bhadrapada. And I was talking to them, and they were saying, I have to move out of my house because I've got like pipes burst in my house. And they said, and I'm looking for other places, and there's this one place that's a restaurant, and there's one place that's by a river. So the thing I was noticing was they were talking about the river, because Uttara Bhadrapada is symbolized by a river. And so what I said to them is, I said, it may not be the actual destination, but you need to explore in that direction, because it's going to help you to understand the rest of the story. And so they did. And when they got back to me, what they explained was that they decided that they were going to stick with the house that they were in and fix the pipes. And so then I said, by any chance, are the pipes that are in your house, are they up above your head? And they said, yes, because each of these lunar mansions is represented by a sutra, or like a kind of a sentence that like holds a lot of meaning. And the sentence for this one is like in the concluding feet of the stool of Ahirapudnyas, right? Is sprinkling upon from above, right? And pressing out juice from below. So they had the sprinkling going on from above. And it's absolutely phenomenal how the nakshatras, or the lunar mansions, tend to convey their symbolism in actual concrete terms in the person's life. So if you take those very same symbols and you, what I like to say, reverse engineer them, what you can do is establish a line of communication with the planet that's in that particular lunar mansion, and begin to kind of rectify the manners that you're out of harmony with that planet, and improve your life in that way. So I do a lot of work with that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So now you were talking about predictive versus empowered approach. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the empowered approach to astrology, when I was saying earlier, is I like to place people not at the whim of fate, but help them to understand how they co-create their experience of consciousness. Mm-hmm. So much along the lines of like we're talking about with that musician, he needs to engage with his destiny. He needs to like kind of move in that particular direction if that's where his passion is.
So let me ask you one thing on that example. If he does that after being told this, or this is in his stars, does that mean he won't make money?
It depends. It depends. I've encountered situations where the karmic patterns that are showing have been completely malleable. And I've encountered situations where a certain level of that karma is going to play out regardless. And there are a lot of different techniques within Vedic astrology. And generally, when you can know it's more of you're going to have a certain degree of this, right? Is when you're using several different systems and they all point in the same direction.
Right, I see. All right. And then what is something like, can you share with us like a favorite situation with a client, a favorite reading, a favorite like win, something that happened?
Yeah, I have a client that I've been working with for a while, and I know they're going to be listening to this. Right. And I know they're okay with me sharing this story, and I know that everybody else whose story I've shared is okay with it too. But I've been working with them since February, I think. And initially it was a situation where they were looking like at working their way through a divorce, and they had a lot of hesitation in terms of telling like family members that, that was the case. And through working with them, we actually got to a point where they had the courage to tell their family, because in Asian culture, it is quite often considered taboo to get divorced. There's a lot of social unacceptance. It's getting to a degree different in our modern times and a little more accessible, but it still exists. So there was a lot of hesitation on their part. And so they finally did it, which was like a huge win for them. And they sent me through a message saying, I just wanted to say thank you, because I never thought I'd be at this place in my life ever. So astrology can really help you to overcome the fears that are there, and work with it. And a lot of times what I'll do with clients when I'm engaging in therapeutic dialogue with them, much like I mentioned with the symbolism, is I start listening for certain keywords from them. So for instance, if people say like, well, I'm concerned about people talking about me, they might have a planet in a section of the sky called Shravana, which deals with the ears, right?
Hmm.
And so immediately I'll go and I'll look and I'll go, do they have a planet there? What's going on with that? And then I'll engage them in dialogue based upon what I'm seeing and bring that back into the conversation. So it kind of becomes like a journey that we take together rather than just me telling them things, which is usually more of the traditional
Right.
astrological approach in that regard.
Interesting. Well, we're coming to the end. Is there anything else you want to share before we close today?
I think that the thing that I would mainly want to share is how exceptionally powerful astrology is over and above the realms of predicting. And quite often when we're looking for prediction to, fix our lives, it's usually because there's a lack of self-trust. Whereas if you work with astrology through the empowered approach to astrology, you can generally find yourself in a position where you're trusting yourself more. And it makes you become more confident in your decisions, which matters more than anything else, because when you've resolved that, you're not going to be concerned about your relationships, and you're not going to be as concerned about your job or concerned about money, because you'll be able to handle it. So it's better, I find, to work with things from the root of the situation rather than working on things from the surface or the symptoms, which is
Right. So
usually
it's not
what we're
really
looking at with prediction. Yeah,
right. So it's not really the circumstances. Once you have that relationship with yourself, you can trust yourself to make more self-honoring decisions and things like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, this was wonderful. Thanks for having me to interview you. It
Oh,
was
and
great
thanks for,
learning about it.
yeah, definitely. And thank you for coming on. Would you tell people, I did it at the beginning, would you tell people about yourself and your program too?
Oh, yes, sure. So, well, most importantly, this is time sensitive. I have a wonderful new challenge coming up, completely free. Find your soul story for impact and income. I am a storytelling coach. And I feel like our stories, sharing our stories, having power over our stories, connecting with people through our stories really can help create the narrative of our life and make it more of a life that we want to live and that we're creating, we're empowered by. And so that starts February 6th, and the URL is forgivenessandfreedom.com/soul story. Little bit about me is that I have performed my one-woman show, my Brooklyn Hamlet, for over 12,000 people from London to Los Angeles. I've helped over 200 of my clients get on stage, entrepreneurs and performers, and I just love the real connection that comes with that, and the healing from our stories, and then sharing to empower everyone. So thanks.
Yes, excellent. And I'll put a link to your challenge down in the comment section for everybody to watch. And thank you
Great.
so much for coming on and interviewing me.
You're welcome.
Bye now.
Bye.
Talk to you later.